composer, artist, philanthropist. Tonight we speak with true Renaissance man Angus Whyte, and we meet iconic actress Kathy Garver, known to generations of fans for her appearance on Family Affair. I'm David Perry, and this is 10%. If memory serves, the first time I met our next guest, he was sitting at the keyboard of a harpsichord. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but that's what my memory tells. Angus, welcome.
Thank you, David.
You think that's possibly true?
It is possible, yes. I had two of them for quite a long time, actually. I had an 18th century one, and I had a modern one that I had built in Germany in the early 60s.
Well, and I didn't even know people, well, I mean, they still exist, but one doesn't think of people still building harpsichords. Who builds harpsichords nowadays?
Almost every major city has one or two harpsichord builders, and there are several local who are excellent and well known. And when I came back from Amsterdam, where I was studying at the conservatory, I also came back with this new German harpsichord, and I already had the 18th century one. And I moved to Boston after 2 years in San Francisco because there were 8 harpsichord builders living there, and I figured there was a lot more interest in Baroque music in Boston at that time, and there was.
Do you think that Boston still considers itself the center of the Baroque music movement?
I don't think they consider themselves the center, but they do have a great interest in music there, and including Baroque music, but so does New York, so does Berkeley. There are other centers now, and certainly in Europe, many, people do, what do you call it, authentic performances on ancient instruments or old instruments or original instruments or
What is it about the harpsichord that speaks to you? And you have studied the harpsichord now or played it for a good many years.
Oh, many years, yes. What appealed to me was that we learned Bach and Handel on the piano, but it was never written for piano. And when you hear it played, when you hear those kinds of music, Couperin and Rameau and Bach and Handel played on the instruments for which the music was written, it sounds right and better if it's properly played, of course.
What is it, just personally, besides the fact that you're actually hearing the music of these composers on the instrument for which it was written, that makes you love the harpsichord?
The clarity, because each voice is very clear when you're playing, and there are no pedals to muffle the sound. Pedals don't exist on harpsichords. What there is what's called terrace dynamics. You engage a whole keyboard, or 2 keyboards, or 3 keyboards, or you mute one of them, and you have these terrace dynamics which are stepped up like this or stepped down, but no fortissimo, no crescendo, no diminuendo, except what you can do by your fingering.
Right. Do you prefer the harpsichord to the piano? I mean, I've heard you on both, and you're a glorious pianist and harpsichordist.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Yeah, I've tried, yeah.
No, it's different kind of music. I don't like to play Bach on the piano, but I certainly like to play Haydn and Mozart and Poulenc and Schubert and Prokofiev and all the other pieces I like to play on the piano. But for the Baroque music, I do prefer the harpsichord, and I rather listen to it on that too.
Do you prefer playing other people's music or composing your own?
Oh, I'd much rather play other people's music.
But when you are composing, who's your influence?
I don't compose very much. I never have.
But I've heard you do.
Oh, I improvise a little.
You improvise a little. You're too modest. Now, you've been around music all your life. I know that it is one of the most important things in your life. Or was it Jefferson said he couldn't imagine living in a world without books? What would be your take on that?
Well, I agree. I couldn't live in a world without books or music or good food or friends or travel or a number of things.
Right. And you've had a number of those and continue to have a number of those in your life. Food,
Yes, I
music, travel, friends. Tell us about Angus Whyte. Where did he start and how did he get here in San Francisco?
He was born on a ranch in the Central Valley, about 100 miles north of here. And my mother brought me here to the World's Fair in 1939 when I was 2.
On Treasure Island?
Yes, that was my first trip to San Francisco. I don't remember it very well, but I have seen photographs. And I started coming here regularly and did all my life. And I finally came to Berkeley and graduated from Berkeley. And then after that I left and traveled and went other places.
Mm-hmm. Well, in other places?
I always came back sooner or later and for shorter or longer periods. I actually lived in Boston for 12 years, in Manhattan for 4, in Washington, D.C. briefly, and also in France a few times, and in Holland and in Austria for music and art. And I came back here, when was it, in '94.
What is it that keeps bringing you back to San Francisco? I always think of you when I know you told that story about living in a tower in France, and when I think about the perfect place where I would see you reading or playing a harpsichord, it's in that tower in France, although I've never been there. But you seem to always come back here. Is it your heart you've left here or something else?
I could never get a job in France that would pay me enough to live on. Otherwise, I'd be there.
Yeah, yeah.
I do love France. I'm a big Francophile, and I have traveled there and lived there extensively, and will, I hope, do so again. In fact, I applied for a writer's retreat at about it's called Fondation Thénault, and it's about an hour outside of Paris to the east, located in Marnay-sur-Seine, and they've invited me to come for a couple of months early next year.
Congratulations.
To work on a book that I have in my computer, or maybe 2 actually, of short stories that I've been writing for many years, and I want to compile them before I croak and get them out into the world.
So what are these short stories about?
Everything. They're about my life, about my travels. Some of them are funny, some of them are tragic. But I started writing a long time ago. But you know, there are so many good writers in the world. It's nerve-wracking to put something out there and not know how it's going to be received.
Well,
but then you get to a certain age and you don't care anymore.
Well, you know, as my husband Alfredo says, when you're 20, you worry what everyone thinks. When you're 40, you don't care what anyone thinks. And if you get to be 60, you realize no one was thinking about you anyway. So, but you know, I'm sure they'll be as delightful as you are.
Thank you.
Now, music and intelligent writing is clearly important to you.
And languages.
And languages. Go ahead.
I got my master's degree in music and French, basically. So they were both important and continue to be important.
Who are some of the biggest influences on your life musically? The people that you have met that you think, that person changed my life?
Well, Alan Curtis at Berkeley when I first studied Baroque music with him, and Gustav Leonhardt in Amsterdam when I studied with him. And I studied with a few other people who had some effect on me. And then I became friends with some great artists, with John Browning, the pianist, and with Samuel Barber, and with Lenny Bernstein, and with Michael Thomas, and a number of really fine musicians. And they all had effects on me. When you're around people like that, they do have effects on you.
What was it like knowing someone like Samuel Barber and Leonard Bernstein, people who not only are in the, you know, the pantheon of great artists, but also for gay people, icons and legends. Did you think of them at that time? Did you realize you were meeting someone who was going to go down in history?
Oh yes, absolutely. I knew that. Well, Sam Barber was already history when I met him, which was in the 70s. I met him through John Browning, and he was actually John who introduced me to Sam, and that was fascinating. He was not at his best when I met him. He was getting older. He'd been very disappointed by the failure of his opera, Antony and Cleopatra. And he never quite got over his breakup with Giancarlo Menotti, ever. And his last years weren't so joyous. But he was a fascinating, brilliant, intelligent, and sometimes witheringly funny man.
And what about Leonard Bernstein? I don't imagine many people called him Lenny.
Oh, everybody called him Lenny, even people who didn't know him.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah. No, everybody called him Lenny. He was a great man. He was a brilliant linguist, a brilliant thinker, an enormous reader. He spoke 5 or 6 languages fluently. He played the piano and conducted and had incredible energy all of his life. And just overdid everything.
Now, you've seen San Francisco through a lot of iterations.
I know.
What is it that keeps bringing you back here, but also talk about some of the things that you think the city has lost since the first time you saw it and how it's gotten better, if you think it has?
It's certainly changed. When I first lived here in the 60s, it was a very, very different town from what it is now. It's become larger, of course, speedier, more corporate. Bohemia was really part of everybody's life back then, and you could live here reasonably. Artists and composers, musicians lived here reasonably, and that's not possible anymore.
Do you think we've lost Bohemia?
In a lot of ways, yes. And of course, the city has become an enormous tourist destination. It always was, but not to the extent that it is now. And the city's more crowded and more expensive and more difficult to live in. And it's still a bubble of delight, and people come here from all over the world.
A bubble of delight.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Did you think you would be a married gay man when you came to San Francisco?
No.
Has that surprised you?
Yes.
And how long now?
Let's see. We got our domestic partnership in 2000, and then we went to Vermont and did the first civil union there. And then we went to Canada in 2003 when it was first possible to be legally married somewhere.
Yep.
We got married in Toronto. And then Mark Leno married us here in 2008.
California State Senator,
Yeah.
and a good friend of yours, I know.
And so we're at least thrice married.
Right.
Tom likes to say he's a serial nuptialist.
Do you think that has made you more political, the whole same-sex marriage issue?
Not really. I mean, I've always been out, you know. It was never a problem for me. And I didn't have a major coming out because nobody gave me a ball or a party. But I was always out, and I didn't suffer the way a lot of closeted gay people did, because I just never was closeted.
Yeah. In closing, what advice would you give a young musician nowadays, someone who maybe was taking up an instrument or an art form like the harpsichord, which was beautiful and unique, but not maybe going to be terribly lucrative?
Think about your future.
Think about your future. Thank you. We've been speaking with Angus Whyte about his past, and we'll speak with him more about his future the next time we have him on. Next up, Kathy Garver. Many of you will remember her from years on The Family Affair. We'll be right back. If you were a little boy in Richmond, Virginia in the 1960s, on Monday night, you spent the evening with a wonderful group of people,